At my mother's funeral, while I was saying my final goodbye, my best friend of 15 years was upstairs rifling through her jewelry box. The security cameras caught everything. When I confronted her with the footage, what she said next shattered not just our friendship, but everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. But let me start from the beginning. Because the betrayal wasn't just what happened that day. It was 15 years in the making. The morning of Mom's funeral dawned gray and drizzling in Millbrook, which felt appropriate. I'd been up since 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, listening to the rain tap against the windows like impatient fingers. At 33, I thought I'd outgrown the urge to crawl into my mother's bed when the world felt too big and scary. Turns out grief doesn't care about your age. Vivian had been gone for exactly 6 days. 6 days since the cancer finally won after a 2-year battle that had consumed our lives, drained our savings, and left me feeling like I'd been hollowed out with a spoon. 6 days of phone calls, funeral arrangements, and people telling me how peaceful she looked at the end. Nothing about watching your mother disappear one labored breath at a time feels peaceful, but I'd learned to smile and nod because arguing with well-meaning people takes energy I didn't have. The house felt wrong without her. Too quiet, too clean. I'd spent the past week frantically organizing things that didn't need organizing, partly because people kept stopping by with casseroles and condolences, but mostly because staying busy kept me from thinking about how I was now officially an orphan. Dad had died when I was 12, a heart attack that came out of nowhere during what should have been a routine Tuesday. Mom and I had been a team ever since, and now the team was down to just me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Presley. Picking you up at 8:30, don't even think about driving yourself today. Already grabbed coffee for both of us, the good stuff from Hartwell Roasters, not that gas station swill you've been living on. Heart. I smiled despite everything. Presley Carmichael had been my best friend since we were 18 when we met during freshman orientation at Westfield University. She was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order 15 years later, who showed up with ice cream after breakups, and who could make you laugh even when you felt like you'd never find anything funny again. Over the years, she'd become more than my best friend. She was the sister I never had, the constant in a life that had been marked by too much loss. During Mom's illness, Presley had been incredible. She'd driven 3 hours from Richmond every other weekend to help with doctor's appointments. She'd researched treatment options when I was too overwhelmed to think straight. She'd held my hand in hospital waiting rooms and brought Mom books when the chemotherapy made her too sick to do much else. When I'd called her sobbing at 2 a.m. last Tuesday to tell her Mom was gone, she'd been in her car within an hour. "I don't have to come," I'd whispered into the phone, my voice raw from crying. "Try and stop me," she'd said, and I'd heard her car keys jingling in the background. That was Presley. Fierce loyalty wrapped in a 5'4" package with curly auburn hair and the kind of infectious laugh that made everyone around her feel like they were part of some exclusive joke. She was a marketing coordinator at a nonprofit in Richmond, which meant she was perpetually underpaid, but passionate about her work helping veterans transition back to civilian life. She lived in a tiny apartment above a vintage bookstore, drove a car that was more rust than metal, and somehow always had money to help friends in need. I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the bone-deep exhaustion that had settled into my body over the past week. Through the bathroom window, I could see the maple tree in the backyard where Mom used to hang bird feeders. She'd loved watching the cardinals and blue jays that visited every morning. I'd have to remember to keep filling those feeders. Another item for the endless list of things that were now my responsibility. By 8:15, I was dressed in the black suit I'd bought specifically for this day, a purchase I'd hoped would be unnecessary for many more years. Mom had only been 58 when the cancer came back with a vengeance after 5 years of remission. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic at first, talking about new treatments and improved survival rates. Mom had joked that she was too stubborn to let some rogue cells get the better of her. She fought hard, harder than anyone should have to fight, but sometimes fighting isn't enough. Presley arrived exactly on time because of course she did. Through the front window, I watched her hurry up the walkway, holding 2 coffee cups and what looked like a bakery bag, her umbrella battling the wind. She was wearing a navy dress that I'd helped her pick out for a wedding last summer, her hair pulled back in the kind of elegant bun that took her exactly 3 minutes to achieve, but would take me 30. "Morning sunshine," she said when I opened the door, pressing one of the coffee cups into my hands. "Thought you might need this, and before you say you're not hungry, there are chocolate croissants in here, and you know your mom would haunt both of us if you didn't eat something." She was right. Mom had been a firm believer in the healing power of good food, especially chocolate. During my divorce 3 years ago, she'd kept my freezer stocked with ice cream and my kitchen counter covered in homemade cookies. "Heartbreak is no excuse for malnutrition," she'd declared, and I'd found myself gaining 10 pounds while my marriage fell apart. "How are you holding up?" Presley asked, following me into the kitchen and setting the bakery bag on the counter. "I keep waiting for it to feel real," I admitted, taking a sip of coffee. It was perfect. Cream, no sugar, exactly how I'd been drinking it since college. Like, I know she's gone, but I keep expecting her to walk down those stairs asking if we made enough coffee for everyone. Presley nodded, her green eyes soft with sympathy. She'd lost her grandmother 2 years ago, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7. She understood the particular weight of losing the person who'd been your anchor. "It's going to be weird for a while," she said gently, "but you don't have to figure it all out today. Today, you just have to get through today." That was Presley. Practical advice wrapped in kindness. She had a way of breaking overwhelming problems down into manageable pieces. When I'd been drowning in paperwork after Mom's diagnosis, she'd helped me organize everything into color-coded folders. When I'd panicked about taking time off work for treatments, she'd helped me research FMLA options and draft emails to my boss. We sat at the kitchen table, where I'd eaten thousands of meals, drinking coffee and picking at croissants while rain continued to patter against the windows. Presley told me about the latest drama at her office, something involving a fundraising gala and a vendor who'd disappeared with half the deposits, and I found myself almost forgetting why we were sitting here in funeral clothes at 8:30 in the morning. "Oh, before I forget," Presley said, reaching into her purse, "I brought these." She pulled out a small plastic bag containing what looked like bobby pins and tiny rubber bands. "For your hair. I know you said you wanted to wear it up. And trust me, you don't want to deal with flyaways in pictures." Pictures. Right. There would be pictures today, because funerals, like weddings, were the kind of occasions that people documented. I'd have to smile and accept condolences and pretend to be holding it together while photographers captured what was probably going to be one of the worst days of my life. "You think of everything," I said, and meant it. "That's what I'm here for," she replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "That and making sure you don't try to drive yourself anywhere today. I'm your designated human for the next 12 hours. At 9:15, we loaded into Presley's Honda Civic and drove the 10 minutes to Thornfield Funeral Home. Mom and I had chosen it because it was small and family-owned, the kind of place that felt more like someone's living room than an institution. The director, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Donovan, had been patient with all my questions and requests, never making me feel like I was being too particular about details that probably didn't matter to anyone but me. The parking lot was already half full, even though the service wasn't scheduled to start until 10. I recognized most of the cars. Neighbors, family friends, former colleagues from the elementary school where Mom had taught 3rd grade for 22 years before retiring. Mrs. Holloway, from next door, was walking slowly toward the entrance, leaning heavily on her cane. She'd brought Mom homemade soup every Sunday during the worst of the chemo treatments. "You ready for this?" Presley asked, turning off the engine. I wasn't, but ready or not, it was happening. Let's get it over with. The next hour passed in a blur of hugs, handshakes, and conversations that felt both deeply meaningful and completely surreal. Mom's former principal told me stories about her classroom innovations that I'd never heard. A former student, now in her 40s with children of her own, cried as she described how Mom had helped her learn to read. My cousin Jeremy drove down from Albany with his wife and twin daughters, the first time I'd seen him since Christmas 2 years ago. Presley stayed close, but not clingy.
somehow knowing exactly when to step in with tissues or water and when to give me space to talk to people. She handled logistics seamlessly, directing people to the guest book, making sure the flower arrangements were positioned correctly, confirming details with Mr. Donovan about the procession to the cemetery. At exactly 10 o'clock, Mr. Donovan asked everyone to take their seats. I'd chosen to speak first while I still had the energy and before emotion completely overwhelmed me. Presley gave me an encouraging nod from the third row as I walked to the podium, my hands shaking slightly as I unfolded the pages I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here to celebrate my mother, Vivian. When I was trying to figure out what to say today, I kept coming back to something Mom used to tell her students every year on the first day of school. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. She borrowed that from Winnie the Pooh, which tells you everything you need to know about the kind of teacher she was. A few people chuckled, which is what I'd hoped for. Mom would have wanted laughter mixed in with the tears.
But she didn't just say those words to her students. She lived them. When my dad died, she could have crumbled. Instead, she figured out how to be both mother and father to a 12-year-old girl who thought the world had ended. When the cancer came back, she could have given up. Instead, she fought with everything she had, not just for herself, but for all of us who weren't ready to let her go. I looked out at the sea of faces, some dabbing at their eyes, others nodding in recognition. Presley was crying openly, but she was smiling too. That proud smile she'd perfected over years of being my biggest cheerleader. Mom taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. She chose to love fiercely, forgive quickly, and find joy in small moments. She chose to believe the best in people, even when they disappointed her. And she chose to face every challenge with grace and humor, even when grace and humor felt impossible. My voice cracked slightly on the last few words, but I pushed through. She would want us to remember her not as someone who lost a battle, but as someone who lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than she found it. And she would want us to take care of each other, because that's what people who love each other do. I folded the pages and returned to my seat, my legs feeling unsteady. Presley reached over and squeezed my arm as Reverend Matthews took the podium for the closing prayer. After the service, we moved to the cemetery for the burial. It was a small, private ceremony, just family and close friends. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, casting everything in muted tones. I stood at the graveside, holding a single red rose, Mom's favorite flower, listening to Reverend Matthews' final words about dust and ashes and eternal rest. When it was over, people began to drift away, making plans to meet at the house for the reception. Presley appeared at my elbow. "How are you doing?" she asked quietly. "I think I'm okay," I said, surprised to realize it was mostly true. "Ready to go home." "I'll drive," she said, linking her arm through mine. "And I'll help set up for everyone." The reception was exactly what Mom would have wanted. Her house filled with people, voices mixing with the sound of coffee percolating and silverware clinking against plates. Presley moved through the rooms like she'd lived there for years, making sure everyone had what they needed, directing people to the guest bathroom, somehow knowing exactly where Mom kept the good serving spoons. I found myself in conversation after conversation, each person sharing a memory or story about Mom that made me laugh or cry or both. Mrs. Kellerman from the school district talked about Mom's legendary Halloween costumes. She dressed as everything from the Cat in the Hat to Albert Einstein. My college roommate Rebecca had driven down from Boston and brought photo albums from our graduation weekend that I'd forgotten existed. Around 2 o'clock, I realized I hadn't seen Presley in a while. I found her in the kitchen, washing dishes and wrapping leftover food. "You don't have to clean," I told her. "This is too much." "It's not too much," she said, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Besides, this is what friends do. Your mom took care of everyone else for decades. Today, we take care of you." I felt tears prick at my eyes again. "I don't know what I would have done without you these past few years, especially today." "You'll never have to find out," said Presley, pulling me into a hug that smelled like her vanilla perfume and felt like safety.
By 4 o'clock, the last guests had left and the house settled into quiet again. Presley and I collapsed on the living room couch, exhausted but oddly peaceful. "You did good today," she said, curling up against the opposite arm of the couch. "Your mom would have been proud." "You think?" "I know. She always said you were the strongest person she knew. Today proved her right." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching shadows lengthen across the hardwood floors. This was one of the things I loved most about our friendship. We didn't always need to fill the quiet with words. Sometimes just being together was enough. "I should probably head back to Richmond soon," Presley said, checking her phone. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow, and this traffic is going to be murder." "Of course," I said, though part of me wanted to ask her to stay longer. The thought of being alone in this house tonight felt daunting. "But I can come back this weekend if you want, help you start going through stuff, or we could just order pizza and watch terrible movies. Whatever you need." "That sounds perfect," I said, meaning it. We hugged goodbye at the front door, one of those long hugs that said everything words couldn't. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing around the corner, before closing the door and leaning against it. The house felt different now, emptier, but also somehow lighter, like some invisible weight had been lifted. I'd gotten through the worst day. I'd honored Mom's memory. I'd been surrounded by love and support, especially from Presley, who'd been my rock through everything. It would be 3 days before I learned that, while I was saying goodbye to my mother, my best friend had been upstairs stealing from her. 3 days before everything I thought I knew about loyalty and friendship and trust would come crashing down around me. But that night, I went to sleep believing I was lucky to have people who loved me. That night, I still thought Presley Carmichael was one of the best people I'd ever known.
The morning after Mom's funeral, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows and the strange realization that the world had kept spinning despite everything feeling like it should have stopped. I'd fallen asleep on the living room couch around midnight, still in my funeral dress, clutching one of Mom's throw pillows like a life preserver. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word travels fast in a town like Millbrook, and apparently everyone wanted to check on poor Cassandra. I scrolled through the messages while coffee brewed in Mom's ancient Mr. Coffee machine, the same one she'd had since I was in high school. "Thinking of you today. Call if you need anything, Mrs. Holloway. Beautiful service yesterday. Your mom raised an amazing daughter, Rebecca. The flowers were gorgeous. Let me know when you're ready for visitors, Cousin Jeremy. You were so strong yesterday. Vivian would be proud. Love you, Presley." I smiled at Presley's message and typed back, "Thank you for everything yesterday. Couldn't have done it without you. Talk soon." Her response came immediately, "Always here for you. Get some rest today." That was Presley, always checking in, always caring. Even with her busy schedule in Richmond, she'd made time to send flowers to 3 of Mom's former colleagues who couldn't make the service. She'd remembered that Mrs. Patterson from down the street had mobility issues and had arranged for someone to pick her up. She'd even thought to bring extra tissues for the service because she knew I'd forget. The house felt massive and echoey without the constant stream of visitors from the past week. Every room held memories that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. Mom's reading glasses on the kitchen counter, her coffee mug in the dishwasher, still stained from Tuesday morning, the last morning. Her crossword puzzle book on the end table, half-finished puzzles waiting for completion that would never come. I spent the day in a strange sort of suspended animation, moving through familiar motions that felt foreign. I organized the stack of sympathy cards that had arrived over the past week. I returned phone calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I made a list of thank you notes I'd need to write, though the thought of finding words to express gratitude for casseroles and condolences felt overwhelming. Around 3 in the afternoon, I decided to tackle Mom's bedroom, not to pack things away. I wasn't ready for that, but to gather her medications and medical equipment to return to the hospice service. The hospital bed had already been picked up, leaving a strange empty space where Mom had spent her final weeks.
Her dresser top looked exactly as it had for the past 20 years. A small jewelry box made of dark wood that Dad had given her for their 10th anniversary, a framed photo of the three of us from my college graduation, a ceramic dish where he kept loose change and hair ties, a bottle of the lavender perfume she'd worn for special occasions. I opened the jewelry box, intending to take inventory of what was inside. Mom didn't have expensive jewelry. She was a teacher after all, but she had pieces that mattered. Her engagement ring and wedding band, which she'd stopped wearing because the chemo made her fingers swell, a pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother, small gold earrings she'd worn to church every Sunday. The box played Fear Elise when opened, the same tinny melody it had produced for as long as I could remember. I used to sneak into her room as a child just to hear that song and look at the tiny ballerina that spun in circles while the music played. Everything looked normal at first glance. The compartments were organized just the way Mom liked them. Rings in one section, earrings in another, necklaces carefully laid out in the main area. But something felt off. I couldn't pinpoint what exactly, just a nagging sense that things weren't quite right. I picked up the pearl necklace, examining the clasp. It was definitely Mom's. I remember her wearing it to my high school graduation. But hadn't there been matching earrings? I could picture them clearly, small pearls with gold settings that she'd inherited from Grandma Rose along with the necklace. I searched through every compartment, moving aside brooches and small rings and a tennis bracelet Mom had splurged on for her 50th birthday. No pearl earrings. Maybe I was misremembering. Grief could play tricks on your memory, couldn't it? But then I noticed something else missing. A small gold bracelet with a heart charm that I'd given her for Mother's Day when I was 16. I'd saved for 3 months to buy it, working at the local ice cream shop every weekend. Mom had cried when she opened it, telling me it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given her. She'd worn it constantly, only taking it off for medical procedures or when her wrists got too swollen. The bracelet wasn't in the jewelry box. I checked every compartment twice, then searched through her dresser drawers thinking maybe she'd put it somewhere else for safekeeping. Nothing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I tried to push it away, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the pieces were at the jeweler for cleaning, maybe Mom had moved them somewhere else for security, maybe she had given them to someone for safekeeping during her illness. But deep down, I knew something was wrong.
I spent the next hour searching the entire bedroom, then expanded to the rest of the house. I checked Mom's purse, her coat pockets, the small safe in her closet where she kept important documents. I even looked in the freezer, remembering a story about an elderly woman who'd hidden valuables in ice cream containers. Nothing. Tuesday morning brought a call from Mr. Donovan at the funeral home. Mom's death certificates were ready for pickup, and there were a few final details to handle regarding the service. I drove to Thornfield feeling like I was moving through thick fog, my mind still churning over the missing jewelry. "How are you holding up, dear?" Mr. Donovan asked as he handed me a manila envelope containing the certificates. He was probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and the sort of gentle demeanor that seemed essential for his profession. "As well as can be expected," I said automatically. Then, because I couldn't stop thinking about it, "Mr. Donovan, I have a strange question. Did anyone from the family ask you about personal items, jewelry, or anything like that?" His brow furrowed slightly. "No, nothing like that. We always recommend that families remove valuable items before the service, but your friend took care of that." "My friend? I'm sorry, which friend?" "The young lady with the auburn hair. She mentioned that the family had asked her to gather your mother's jewelry for safekeeping before the visitation. Very thoughtful, really. Sometimes people worry about items going missing during services." The world tilted sideways. "Auburn hair?" "Yes, she was very respectful about it. Said she wanted to make sure everything was secure before people started arriving. She had a key to the house, seemed to know exactly where everything was. Presley. He was describing Presley. I managed to thank Mr. Donovan and make it to my car before my hands started shaking. Presley had taken Mom's jewelry. Not stolen, taken. There was a difference, wasn't there? She'd probably just been trying to help, to keep valuable items safe during the chaos of the funeral. She'd probably planned to give everything back and just forgot in all the emotion of the day. But why hadn't she mentioned it? And why had she told Mr. Donovan that the family had asked her to do it when no one had said anything to me about it? I sat in the funeral home parking lot for 20 minutes, my phone in my hand, trying to figure out what to say. How do you ask your best friend if she took your dead mother's jewelry without sounding like you're accusing her of theft? Finally, I typed, "Hey, quick question. Did you happen to put Mom's jewelry somewhere safe during the service? Mr. Donovan mentioned someone from the family gathered it up, and I can't find a few pieces." I stared at the message for another 5 minutes before hitting send. Presley's response came 3 hours later. "What jewelry? I didn't touch anything in her room. Maybe check with Jeremy or one of the other relatives." My blood went cold. She'd lied. Mr. Donovan had specifically described her. Auburn hair, knew where everything was, had a key to the house. There was no mistaking who he'd been talking about. But Presley had looked me in the eye and lied. I called Jeremy immediately. "Hey, this might sound weird, but did you or anyone else take any of Mom's jewelry for safekeeping during the funeral?" "Jewelry? No. Why would we do that? Is something missing?" I explained about the pearl earrings and the bracelet, about Mr. Donovan's comment, trying to keep my voice level and rational. "That's really strange. Are you sure your friend didn't just misunderstand what Mr. Donovan meant? Maybe someone else took them earlier in the week." "Maybe. But I'd been in that house every day since Mom died, and I'm certain the jewelry had been there on Monday night when I looked through the box searching for Mom's pearl necklace to bury her in. I'd specifically decided against the necklace because I wanted to keep it, but I remembered seeing both the earrings and the bracelet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction with Presley over the past week, looking for signs I'd missed. Had she been acting strangely? Had there been moments when her behavior didn't make sense? But every memory seemed normal. Presley being helpful, caring, supportive. Presley going above and beyond to make sure everything went smoothly. Presley having access to the house, knowing where things were because she'd been coming here for 15 years. Presley with the opportunity to take whatever she wanted while everyone else was at the funeral home. Wednesday morning, I decided to check one more place. Mom had a safety deposit box at Millbrook Community Bank where she kept important documents and a few valuable items. Maybe she'd moved the missing pieces there for security. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, had known our family for years. She expressed her condolences and led me to the vault where Mom's box was stored. Inside, I found exactly what I expected: her will, the deed to the house, some savings bonds, and a few pieces of jewelry that belonged to my grandmother. But also something I didn't expect: a handwritten inventory of all Mom's jewelry, dated just 6 months ago when she'd updated her will. Every piece was listed in Mom's careful script, including detailed descriptions and estimated values.
The pearl earrings were on the list. The heart bracelet was on the list. Also on the list were several other pieces I hadn't thought to look for yet. A small diamond ring that had been Dad's mother's, a vintage brooch shaped like a butterfly, a pair of gold earrings with small sapphires. I rushed home and checked the jewelry box again, this time comparing everything against Mom's inventory. 5 pieces were missing. 5 pieces worth several $100s each, not enough to make someone rich, but enough to matter to someone struggling financially. And suddenly, I remembered something Presley had mentioned during one of her visits last month. Her nonprofit was facing budget cuts. She'd been worried about layoffs, about whether her position would survive the financial restructuring. She'd seemed stressed about money in a way I'd never seen before. But Presley wouldn't steal from me. From my dying mother. Would she? I thought about calling her again, giving her another chance to tell the truth, but I already knew what would happen. She'd deny it again, maybe suggest that Mom had given the jewelry away or sold it and forgotten to update the inventory. She'd be convincing because she was good at being convincing, good at making people believe what she wanted them to believe. Instead, I did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I called the funeral home and asked if they had security cameras. "Oh yes," Mr. Donovan said. "We installed a full system last year after some vandalism incidents. Cameras cover all the entrances and most of the interior spaces. Why do you ask?" "I think someone may have taken some of my mother's jewelry during the service. Could I possibly review the footage from last Saturday?" There was a pause. "Of course, dear. That's very concerning. Can you come in tomorrow morning? I'll have our security coordinator pull up the relevant footage." Thursday morning, I sat in a small office at Thornfield Funeral Home, watching grainy black and white footage on a computer monitor. Mr. Donovan's security coordinator, a retired police officer named Bill Turner, fast-forwarded through hours of video showing people arriving, signing the guest book, taking their seats. "There," I said, pointing at the screen. "That's her." The timestamp showed 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the service was scheduled to begin. Presley appeared on camera walking quickly toward the back hallway that led to the family preparation rooms. She looked around before disappearing from view, her body language furtive in a way that made my stomach clench. "Let me switch to the hallway camera," Bill said, clicking through different feeds. The hallway camera showed Presley walking purposefully toward the room where Mom's body had been prepared. She was carrying a small black purse and looking around as if checking to make sure she wasn't being watched. "She told us she needed to check on something for the family," Mr. Donovan said quietly. "We didn't think anything of it. She seemed to know exactly where she was going." The next camera angle showed Presley entering the preparation room. The timestamp showed she was inside for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When she emerged, her purse looked noticeably fuller, bulging in a way it hadn't before. I watched my best friend of 15 years walk back down the hallway, her steps quick and confident. At 9:52 a.m., she returned to the main area and took her seat in the third row, exactly where she'd been sitting when I gave my eulogy. The same seat where she'd dabbed at her eyes with tissues and given me encouraging smiles. "I'm so sorry," Mr. Donovan said quietly. "We had no idea. She seemed like family." She had been family. Or I'd thought she was. Bill copied the relevant footage onto a flash drive for me. "You'll want to file a police report," he said gently. "This is pretty clear evidence of theft." I drove home in a daze, the flash drive burning like a hot coal in my purse. 15 years of friendship. 15 years of trust and shared secrets and late-night phone calls and road trips and celebrations and heartbreaks. 15 years of believing that Presley Carmichael was one of the best people I'd ever known. And she'd stolen from my dead mother. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, staring at the house where Presley had spent countless hours, where she'd helped me study for exams and listened to me cry over boys and celebrated every milestone and achievement, where she'd held my hand during Mom's diagnosis and helped me navigate insurance paperwork and shown up with soup when I was too exhausted to cook, where she'd apparently been cataloging valuable items to steal when the opportunity arose. My phone buzzed with a text message from Presley. "How are you doing today? Thinking of you. Heart." I stared at the message for a long time. The heart emoji seemed to mock me, a tiny symbol of affection from someone who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way at the worst possible time. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because I had no idea what to say to someone who's stolen from my dead mother and then lied about it while pretending to comfort me in my grief.
Instead, I got out of the car, walked into the house, and began planning what I was going to say when I confronted her with the evidence. Because Presley Carmichael was about to learn that stealing from the dead comes with consequences, and our 15-year friendship was about to come to a very ugly end.
I spent Thursday night planning exactly what I was going to say to Presley. I wrote it down, crossed it out, wrote it again. How do you confront someone who's been your closest friend for 15 years about stealing from your dead mother? What words exist for that level of betrayal? By Friday morning, I'd settled on direct confrontation. No games, no traps, just the truth laid out plainly with the evidence to back it up. I called Presley at 9 a.m., knowing she'd be at her office in Richmond. "Cassandra, how are you holding up?" Her voice was warm, concerned, exactly the same as it had been for years. "I need to see you," I said. "Can you come to Millbrook this weekend?" "Of course. Is everything okay?" "You sound different." Different. That was one way to put it. "We need to talk in person. It's important." "I can drive up tomorrow morning." Should I be worried? I almost laughed at the question. Should she be worried? She'd stolen from my dead mother and lied about it to my face. Worried didn't begin to cover what she should be feeling. "Just come," I said. "We'll talk then." Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through 15 years of memories, looking for signs I'd missed. Had Presley always been capable of this? Had there been other lies, other betrayals I'd been too trusting to see? She arrived at 10:30, carrying coffee from Hartwell Roasters and wearing the same concerned expression she'd worn all week. She looked exactly like the friend I'd known for half my adult life. Auburn curls pulled back in a messy bun, freckles scattered across her nose, wearing jeans and the green sweater I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. "You look terrible," she said, pulling me into a hug that I didn't return. "Have you been sleeping?" "Not much." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Come in. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have warned her because her expression shifted slightly. The warm concern remained, but underneath it, I caught a flicker of wariness. We sat in the living room where we'd spent countless hours over the years. The same couch where we'd planned road trips and dissected relationships and stayed up too late watching movies. Now it felt like a stage set for the final act of our friendship. "What's going on?" Presley asked, settling into her usual spot at the far end of the couch. "You're scaring me a little." I pulled out my phone and opened the video file that Bill Turner had sent me. "I want to show you something." The security footage played on my phone screen. Grainy black and white images showing Presley walking purposefully through the funeral home, entering the preparation room, emerging 4 minutes later with a visibly fuller purse. Presley's face went white. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at the phone like it might explode. Then she looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Calculation. She was weighing her options, deciding which lie might work. "I can explain," she said finally. "Please do." She took a shaky breath. "Mom asked me to take care of her jewelry months ago when she was getting sicker. She was worried about it being in the house during the funeral with all those people coming and going." The lie came so smoothly, so convincingly, that for half a second I almost believed her. This was Presley, after all. Presley who'd never lied to me about anything important. Presley who'd been Mom's friend too. But I'd had time to prepare for this. "That's interesting," I said calmly, "because when I asked you about the jewelry on Tuesday, you said you didn't touch anything in her room. You told me to check with Jeremy." Her mouth opened, then closed. I watched her scramble for another explanation. I was confused. It's been such an emotional week, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I should have told you right away." "Where is it?" "What?" "The jewelry. If Mom asked you to keep it safe, where is it?" Another pause, another calculation. "It's at my apartment. I was going to bring it today, actually. That's why I brought the coffee. I thought we could make a whole thing of it, go through her pieces together."
But she hadn't brought anything except coffee, and I could see in her eyes that she was making this up. I pulled out the inventory list I'd found in Mom's safety deposit box. This is a list Mom made 6 months ago of all her jewelry. She was very specific about what she had. I read from the list: pearl earrings with gold settings, inherited from Rose Mitchell; gold heart bracelet, gift from daughter; diamond ring, white gold setting, inherited from Patricia Holloway; butterfly brooch, vintage, estimated value $400; sapphire earrings, small stones, gold setting. Her face had gone from white to gray. Cassandra, those are the 5 pieces missing from her jewelry box. The 5 pieces that, according to the funeral home security footage, you took from the preparation room during Mom's service, while I was giving her eulogy. The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier. Presley stared at me, and I watched something crumble in her expression. The warm concern mask slipped away, leaving something harder underneath. "You don't understand," she said finally. "Desperate for what?"
Money. Her voice was flat now, resigned. The nonprofit is folding. Not just budget cuts. Completely shutting down. I lost my job 3 weeks ago, and I haven't told anyone. I've been living on credit cards, and those are maxed out. My rent is 2 months behind. I'm going to be evicted next week. I stared at her, trying to process this information. Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what? You've been paying for your mom's medical bills for 2 years. You told me yourself you'd wiped out your savings. What were you going to do? Take out a loan you couldn't afford to bail me out? I would have figured something out. No, you wouldn't have, because you're responsible, Cassandra. You're the one who thinks things through and makes smart choices and doesn't get herself into situations like this. Her voice turned bitter. You're the one who has her life together. So you decided to steal from my dying mother? I didn't plan it. The words exploded out of her. I never meant for it to happen. But when I was helping you clean the house that first day, I saw the jewelry box, and I knew your mom had nice pieces. Stuff that was actually worth something. And I thought maybe she wouldn't mind. She loved me too, you know? She always said I was like a second daughter. The audacity of it took my breath away. You thought she wouldn't mind you stealing from her? Not stealing, borrowing. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I was going to sell the pieces, get back on my feet, and then buy them back before you ever knew they were gone. From a pawn shop? You were going to pawn my mother's jewelry? Presley's composure finally cracked completely. Tears started streaming down her face, but they felt manipulative rather than genuine. I was drowning, Cassandra. I have student loans and credit card debt, and my car is about to be repossessed. I was looking at living in my car or moving back in with my aunt in Nebraska. I panicked. So you waited until the day of my mother's funeral to rob her corpse? The harsh words hit their target. Presley flinched like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. What was it like, then? Walk me through it. You sat in that pew watching me cry over my mother, and you were thinking about which pieces of her jewelry would get you the most money? Stop! You hugged me afterwards and told me how sorry you were for my loss, knowing you'd just stolen from her. Stop it! Presley was crying harder now, mascara running down her cheeks. I know how it looks, okay? I know how terrible it is. But I've been your friend for 15 years. That has to count for something. Has it? I asked quietly. Have you really been my friend for 15 years? Because I'm starting to wonder what else you've lied about. Something shifted in her expression. The tears stopped abruptly, and when she looked at me, I saw a hardness I'd never noticed before. You want to know the truth? Fine. You want to know what 15 years of friendship with perfect Cassandra has been like? It's been exhausting. I blinked, caught off guard by the venom in her voice. Do you know how hard it is being best friends with someone who never makes mistakes?
Someone whose biggest problem is deciding which graduate program to attend or whether to buy a house at 28. Someone whose mom sends care packages and remembers birthdays and shows up to every important event. I didn't know you felt that way. Didn't you? She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. When was the last time I had good news to share? When was the last time you called me for advice instead of to vent about your problems? When was the last time our friendship felt equal? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. Because when I really thought about it, she wasn't entirely wrong. Presley was always the one offering support, and I was always the one needing it. During my divorce, during Mom's illness, during every crisis in my life. But that didn't justify what she'd done. So you decided to steal from my mother to even the score?
I decided to take what I needed to survive. And yeah, maybe part of me thought it was about time something went my way for once. We stared at each other across the coffee table where we'd shared 1,000 conversations over the years, but the person sitting across from me now was a stranger. Bitter, calculating, capable of theft and elaborate lies. "Where is the jewelry now?" I asked. She hesitated. "I sold it." "All of it?" "Most of it. The pearl earrings and the diamond ring went to a jewelry store in Richmond. The bracelet and the brooch I pawned. The sapphire earrings, I still have those." "How much did you get?" $1,200 total. $1,200. She destroyed our friendship and stolen from my dead mother for $1,200. "I want it back," I said. "All of it." "I don't have it anymore. I told you I had to." "I don't care what you had to do. You're going to figure out how to get it back, or I'm filing a police report." Presley's face went pale again. "You wouldn't." "Try me." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Holloway's dog barking and the distant sound of a lawnmower. Normal Saturday sounds in a normal neighborhood, while my world disintegrated in the living room. "I can get some of it back," Presley said finally. "The pawnshop probably still has the bracelet and the brooch. But the other pieces, the jewelry store won't take returns on purchases like that." "Then you'll have to buy them back." "With what money? I told you I'm broke." "That's not my problem. You created the situation. You figure out how to fix it." She was quiet for another minute, then looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "If I get everything back, can we try to work through this? I know I messed up, but we've been friends for so long. Maybe we could—" "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I meant it completely. "Presley, you didn't just steal from me. You stole from my dying mother. You sat at her funeral knowing what you'd done. You looked me in the eye and lied when I asked you directly about it. And now you're trying to justify it by blaming me for having a better childhood than you did?" "I didn't mean—" "I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. And what you did was unforgivable." Tears started flowing again, but I was unmoved. I'd cried plenty of tears over the past week, for my mother, for my loss, for the friend I thought I'd had. I wasn't crying anymore for Presley Carmichael. "I have 1 week. Get me back everything you can, and we'll call it even. But after that, I never want to see you again." "Cassandra, please." 1 week. And if you try to contact me after that for any reason, I will file charges. I have the security footage. I have Mr. Donovan as a witness. I have documentation of everything that was stolen. Don't test me." She nodded miserably, gathering her purse and jacket with shaking hands. At the front door, she turned back one more time. "For what it's worth, I really did love your mom. And I really was your friend, even if I was a terrible one." "If you'd really loved her, you wouldn't have stolen from her corpse," I said, and closed the door. 6 days later, a package arrived by overnight delivery. Inside was the heart bracelet, still in its original gift box, and the butterfly brooch wrapped carefully in tissue paper. Also, a cashier's check for $800 and a note written in Presley's familiar handwriting. "This is everything I could get back. The check should cover the cost of replacing the other pieces.
I know it doesn't make anything right, but it's all I can do. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. I'm moving back to Nebraska next week. You'll never hear from me again. P. I held the bracelet in my hands, the same bracelet I'd saved for months to buy when I was 16. The same bracelet Mom had worn almost every day until she got too sick. It looked exactly the same, but it felt different somehow. Tainted. I put everything in Mom's jewelry box and closed the lid. The tiny ballerina spun to Fur Elise just like always, but the melody sounded sadder now. 2 months later, I was packing up Mom's house to put it on the market when I found a letter in her desk drawer addressed to me in her careful handwriting. The date showed she'd written it just 2 weeks before she died. My darling Cassandra, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably feeling lost and alone. I want you to know that you are stronger than you realize and more loved than you could ever imagine. I also want you to know that people will sometimes disappoint you in ways you never expected. Friends you trusted will let you down. Family members will show their true colors when times get hard. This isn't a reflection of your worth or your judgment, it's simply human nature. When this happens, and it will happen, remember that betrayal tells you more about the other person than it does about you. And remember that the people who truly love you will prove it through their actions, not their words.
You have good instincts about people, sweetheart. Trust them. And don't let one person's failures make you stop believing in the possibility of genuine friendship and love. I love you always. Mom. I read the letter 3 times, wondering if somehow Mom had known what was coming. Probably not the specifics, but she'd understood that losing her would make me vulnerable, and that vulnerable people sometimes discover uncomfortable truths about those closest to them. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Then I finished packing up the house that had been home for 33 years, ready to start the next chapter of my life. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working as a freelance grant writing and slowly rebuilding my life. I'd made a few new friends, women I'd met at a grief support group who understood loss and weren't interested in taking advantage of it. One evening, I was having dinner with Sarah, a widow who'd lost her husband the same week I lost Mom, when she mentioned seeing a familiar face at the grocery store. Remember that friend of yours you told me about? The one who, Sarah was too polite to say, stole from your dead mother in public. Presley? That's the one. I saw her at Kroger yesterday. She looked terrible, thin, tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. She was buying ramen noodles and generic mac and cheese, paid with food stamps. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, followed immediately by a harder emotion I couldn't quite name. Did she see you? I don't think so, but Cassandra, she looked like someone who'd lost everything. Maybe she had. Maybe moving back to Nebraska hadn't worked out. Maybe the consequences of her choices had finally caught up with her. I thought about Mom's letter, about forgiveness and second chances, and the possibility that people could change. But I also thought about sitting in that funeral home, watching security footage of my best friend stealing from my mother's corpse. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some trust, once broken, can never be repaired. Good, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. And for the first time since Mom's funeral, I felt completely at peace with mine. But this story wasn't over yet, because sometimes life has a way of testing your resolve when you least expect it. 8 months after cutting ties with Presley, I thought I'd close that chapter of my life for good. I was wrong. It started with a phone call from Detective Maria Rodriguez with the Millbrook Police Department. I was at work, reviewing grant applications for a local literacy program, when my phone rang with an unknown number. Ms. Mitchell? This is Detective Rodriguez. I'm calling about a case involving theft and fraud. I believe you may have information relevant to our investigation. My stomach dropped.
What kind of case? We're investigating multiple incidents of theft from elderly individuals and families dealing with end-of-life situations. Your name came up in connection with someone named Presley Carmichael. The room seemed to tilt sideways. What do you mean, multiple incidents? Miss Carmichael was arrested yesterday in Riverside County on charges of theft, elder abuse, and fraud. During questioning, she admitted to several similar crimes over the past few years. We found your contact information in her belongings, along with some interesting documentation. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of documentation? Could you come to the station this afternoon? I think it would be better to discuss this in person. 2 hours later, I sat in a small conference room at the Millbrook Police Department, staring at a stack of photographs and documents spread across the table. Detective Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair, sat across from me with a thick file folder. What you experienced with Miss Carmichael wasn't an isolated incident, she said gently. We've identified at least 6 other cases over the past 3 years where she targeted families during vulnerable times. She slid a photograph across the table. It showed a handwritten list in Presley's familiar script. My blood ran cold as I read it. Mitchell family, funeral 3:15, jewelry box upstairs, diamonds and pearls, security cameras. Hartwell family, hospital stay August 20, silverware collection, daughter traveling. Chen family, assisted living transition 11/21, coin collection, spare key location. The list went on. 7 families total, including mine. Each entry contained details about valuable items, security measures, and optimal timing for theft. She kept records? I whispered. Very detailed ones. Dates, locations, estimated values, even notes about family dynamics, and when people would be most distracted. Detective Rodriguez pulled out another document. This appears to be her target selection criteria. The second page made me feel sick. It was titled Vulnerability Assessment and contained categories like recent death in family, medical crisis, financial stress, and geographic isolation. Under each category were names, including mine. She was hunting us, I said, the words coming out hollow. That's exactly what she was doing. Ms. Carmichael had a very systematic approach. She would identify families going through difficult times, insert herself as a helpful friend or volunteer, gain access to homes, and document valuable items for later theft. I thought about all those weekends Presley had driven from Richmond to help with Mom's care. All those times she'd been so helpful, so observant, so eager to lend a hand with household tasks. She was casing our house, I realized. Every time she visited, she was cataloging things to steal. We believe so, yes, but notes indicate she'd been planning the theft for several months before your mother's funeral. Detective Rodriguez pulled out a thick manila envelope. We recovered some additional items from her apartment when she was arrested. I believe these belong to you. Inside the envelope were Mom's sapphire earrings, the ones Presley claimed she still had but had never returned. Also a small silver locket I hadn't even realized was missing, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of Mom's jewelry taken with what looked like a phone camera from multiple angles. She photographed everything, Detective Rodriguez explained, apparently to research values and find the best places to sell items. I stared at a photo of Mom's pearl necklace, the one she'd been buried in. Even that hadn't been safe from Presley's predatory assessment. How did you catch her? The Riverside case. She tried to steal from an elderly man whose daughter happened to be a prosecutor. The daughter got suspicious when Miss Carmichael offered to help clean out the father's house after he moved to assisted living. She installed hidden cameras and caught her in the act. Detective Rodriguez showed me another photograph. Presley walking out of an elderly man's house carrying a box, looking confident and casual. It was eerily similar to the funeral home footage I'd seen months earlier. When they searched her apartment, they found all this documentation, plus items that clearly belonged to other families. That's when they called us. What happens now? She's confessed to multiple charges. The district attorney is putting together a case that should result in significant prison time. But we need victim impact statements from everyone she stole from. I nodded, trying to process everything. The other families, do they know? We're in the process of contacting them. Some of the thefts happened years ago, and the families never suspected anything beyond random burglary or misplaced items. Miss Carmichael was very good at making her thefts look like coincidences. Detective Rodriguez handed me a business card. If you're willing to provide a statement and testify if needed, it would help ensure she faces appropriate consequences. She caused a lot of pain to families who were already suffering. I took the card, my hands shaking slightly. How long was she doing this? Based on the documentation, at least 5 years. Possibly longer. These are just the cases we can prove. 5 years? That meant Presley had been a predator for most of the time I'd known her as an adult. While I'd been trusting her with my deepest fears and greatest losses, she'd been calculating how to profit from my pain. There's something else, Detective Rodriguez said carefully. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed some concerning findings. Miss Carmichael appears to have what the psychologist termed predatory empathy, the ability to identify and exploit emotional vulnerability in others. She specifically targets people during grief and crisis because that's when their guard is down. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. So our entire friendship? I can't speak to that, but the evidence suggests she was very skilled at identifying and manipulating people who were emotionally vulnerable. The targeting appears to have been deliberate. I thought about how Presley had always seemed to appear during my worst moments. My divorce, Mom's diagnosis, every crisis and heartbreak. I thought she was an unusually caring friend. Instead, she had been a predator drawn to weakness like a shark to blood. The other victims, I asked, how are they handling this? It's been difficult. Several of them are elderly, and learning they were deliberately targeted has been traumatic. There's also the financial impact. Not everyone can afford to replace what was stolen. A thought occurred to me. The $1,200 she got from Mom's jewelry, was that enough to solve her financial problems? Detective Rodriguez shook her head. Miss Carmichael wasn't actually facing eviction or job loss when she robbed your family. We checked with her employer and landlord. She was behind on some bills, but not in the dire situation she described to you. Another lie. Another manipulation. So why did she do it? According to the psychological evaluation, she appears to be motivated by a combination of financial gain and what the doctor called predatory empathy. She derives satisfaction from deceiving and harming people she trusts. I felt sick. She enjoyed it? The evidence suggests that, yes. The detailed record-keeping, the photographs, the elaborate planning, it all points to someone who took pleasure in the deception as much as the financial gain. I left the police station feeling like I'd been hollowed out and filled with ice water. Everything I'd believed about my friendship with Presley had been a lie. Not just the end, but possibly all of it. She had never been a loyal friend who made one terrible mistake. She'd been a predator who spent years studying me for weaknesses to exploit. That evening, I called Sarah from my grief support group and told her everything. "My God, Cassandra," she said when I finished. "How are you processing this?" "I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated, like, see, I was right not to forgive her. But mostly I just feel empty. Like I have to grieve the friendship all over again, but worse this time. Because now you know it was never real." Exactly. At least before I could tell myself she had been a good friend who made a terrible choice. Now I have to accept that she was never my friend at all. I was just a mark.
Sarah was quiet for a moment. You know what this means, though? It means your instincts were right. You knew something was fundamentally wrong with her, even if you couldn't articulate what it was. You protected yourself by cutting ties. She was right, but it didn't make the revelation hurt less. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom giving my victim impact statement. Presley was at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking smaller than I remembered. She didn't make eye contact with me during my testimony. I spoke about the violation of trust, the added trauma during an already devastating time, and the way her betrayal had infected my memories of Mom's final months. I talked about the security footage and the lies, about the calculated nature of her theft, and the way she'd weaponized my grief. The defendant didn't just steal jewelry, I told the judge. She stole my ability to trust my own judgment. She made me question every friendship, every act of kindness, every person who offers help during difficult times. That damage goes far beyond the monetary value of what she took. When I finished, I finally looked at Presley. She was crying, but something about her tears seemed performative. Even now, even here, she was putting on a show. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered restitution to all victims. As the bailiff led her away, Presley turned and looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. Her expression wasn't remorseful or apologetic. It was angry. Even in defeat, even facing prison, she was furious at being caught, rather than sorry for what she'd done. That look told me everything I needed to know about who Presley Carmichael really was. 6 months after the trial, I was cleaning out my computer files when I came across the security footage from the funeral home. I'd kept it all this time, partly as evidence and partly as a reminder to trust my instincts. For the first time since that terrible Saturday, I watched it again. But this time, I saw something different. Yes, I saw Presley stealing from my dead mother, but I also saw myself making the right choice. I saw someone who had discovered a betrayal and handled it with strength and dignity. I saw someone who had refused to be manipulated by tears and excuses and false friendship. I saw someone who had learned the difference between forgiveness and doormat behavior. I deleted the file. I didn't need it anymore. A year later, I was working in my garden when Mrs. Holloway from next door called over the fence. "Cassandra, you have a visitor." I looked up to see a woman about my age walking across the yard. She had short blonde hair and nervous eyes, and she was carrying a manila envelope. "Miss Mitchell? I'm Janet Hartwell. I got your contact information from Detective Rodriguez. I was one of the other victims of Presley Carmichael." I invited her in for coffee, and she told me her story. Her father had been in the hospital for heart surgery when Presley had volunteered to help organize his house. The family had lost a collection of silver coins that had been in the family for generations. "I wanted to thank you," Janet said. "Detective Rodriguez told me you were the first person to gather evidence and confront her directly. If you hadn't done that, she'd probably still be out there targeting families like ours." She handed me the envelope. "I also wanted to give you this." Inside were photographs and newspaper clippings about the other victims. An elderly couple whose antique jewelry had disappeared during their daughter's wedding preparations, a widow whose late husband's coin collection had vanished while she was dealing with his estate, a family whose grandfather's war medals had been stolen during his funeral arrangements. "We started a support group," Janet explained, "families affected by this kind of predatory friendship fraud. We meet once a month, partly to process what happened, and partly to educate people about the warning signs. Would you be interested in joining us?" I looked at the faces in the photographs, people who, like me, had been targeted during their most vulnerable moments, people who had learned that sometimes the person offering help has ulterior motives. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." The support group met in the community room of the Millbrook Public Library. 8 families total, plus a few professionals who worked with fraud victims. We shared our stories, compared notes about warning signs, and slowly healed from the particular trauma of being betrayed by someone we had trusted. But we also did something else. We turned our pain into purpose. Working with local law enforcement and elder care organizations, we developed educational materials about predatory friendship fraud. We spoke at community centers and senior living facilities. We created a checklist of warning signs and safety protocols for families dealing with end-of-life situations. We called ourselves the Millbrook Guardian Network, and within 6 months, we'd helped prevent at least 3 attempted frauds by people using Presley's playbook. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said during one of our meetings.
She thought she could destroy us, but instead she made us stronger and more connected than we ever would have been otherwise. She was right. Presley had tried to isolate us, to make us doubt our ability to trust and form genuine relationships. Instead, she'd brought together a group of people committed to protecting others from the same harm.
2 years after Mom's funeral, I was finally ready to go through the last of her belongings. I'd kept one box of her most personal items, saving it for when I felt strong enough to handle the memories. At the bottom of the box, I found a small notebook I'd never seen before. The cover was labeled Letters to Cassandra in Mom's handwriting. Inside were dozens of short entries, written over the final months of her life. Some were funny observations about hospital food or difficult nurses. Some were memories she wanted me to have. And some were warnings. One entry, dated just a week before she died, stopped me cold. I've been thinking about Presley lately. There's something about her that bothers me, though I can't put my finger on what it is. She's always so helpful, so eager to take care of things, but something feels performative about it, like she's acting the part of a caring friend rather than actually being one. I hope I'm wrong. I know how much she means to you, but trust your instincts if something ever feels off about her. Sometimes the people who try hardest to seem helpful are the ones with the most to hide. I read the entry 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Mom had seen it. Even while dying, even while grateful for any help she could get, she'd sensed something false about Presley. But she'd also trusted me to figure it out on my own. I thought about all the ways the story could have ended differently. I could have ignored my instincts and accepted Presley's lies. I could have forgiven her out of misplaced loyalty and remained vulnerable to future manipulation. I could have let her betrayal make me suspicious of everyone who offered genuine help. Instead, I'd learned to trust myself. I'd learned the difference between healthy skepticism and paranoid isolation. I'd learned that real friends don't need to be tested. They prove themselves through consistent, selfless action over time. And I'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself and others is to refuse to be a victim twice. 3 years have passed since I first told this story. Presley was released from prison 6 months ago after serving her full sentence. According to Detective Rodriguez, she's living in a halfway house in another state and is prohibited from contacting any of her victims. I don't know what kind of person she is now or whether prison changed her at all. I don't need to know. That chapter of my life is closed and I have no interest in reopening it. What I do know is this. I've built a life surrounded by genuine relationships based on mutual respect and trust. I've learned to recognize the difference between someone who helps because they care and someone who helps because they want something. I've also learned that healing from betrayal doesn't require forgiveness. It requires understanding, boundaries, and the courage to build something better from the wreckage. The Millbrook Guardian Network now has 43 members across 3 counties. We've prevented an estimated $127,000 in fraud losses and helped dozens of families avoid the kind of betrayal I experienced. Mom's jewelry box sits on my dresser now. I added a few new pieces over the years, nothing expensive, just items of meaning. The heart bracelet is there, along with the butterfly brooch and the sapphire earrings that were eventually recovered. Sometimes I open the box just to hear Fur Elise and watch the tiny ballerina spin. It reminds me that some things can be restored, even after they've been stolen. And it reminds me that I have the strength to protect what matters most. If you've watched this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced similar betrayal, know that you're not alone and that you deserve better. Trust your instincts, set your boundaries, and don't let anyone convince you that being cautious means being broken. Some people are exactly who they seem to be. Others are very good at pretending. Learn to tell the difference. And if this story helped you in any way, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing these important stories. Take care of yourselves out there.